everything, always the value that is in team meetings. It's just, it is amazing, isn't it? We are truly blessed. I see Lynette. Is that Lynette Burton that just...
Yes. Hi, Robin. I'm so sorry.
Oh.
I've been out of town. And congratulations again. And I will call you so we can chat. And because I am just so happy and I miss you. So thanks for reaching out. It's just I was in Boston with my daughter. She had a little procedure.
Oh, is she all right now?
Oh, she's great. She's
Good.
great. Yes, thank you for asking.
Good. I hope the weather was. I hear the weather in Boston during the summer and early fall is just amazing.
It is so nice. As a matter of fact, every Sunday that I was there,
Huh?
we spent on the beaches. They have nice beaches.
Who would have thought?
I know.
Wow.
And the weather is nicer, so it's not as hot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was really nice. I'm like, wow, I could come here for the beaches, but the cold, I have to go.
Oh, I know. Do you know I've never been to Boston? I've traveled to almost every state in the United States, but I've never been to Boston.
Oh, you have to. It's so cute and quaint. It's just so, it's compact.
Mm-hmm.
The traffic is crazy. People drive really crazy. The roads are different, but it's very nice. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Robin, we're live on Facebook now, so you ready?
Sorry.
Well, we just heard all about Boston, so we are happy that you joined us. So for those of you, Heather, hello, nice to see you face to face on Zoom.
Hi.
Hi, and Brett, I've got Brett on there. Who else do we have on here? There's a troublemaker. A troublemaker is in the room. Scott Lemon, he's the troublemaker. Everybody watch out for him. He's got himself on mute.
Don't
Okay.
make me leave this meeting.
He's going to leave the meeting. All right, you guys, thanks so much for joining us. So before we get into the information, what I want to do is I'd like to make sure that we are addressing any questions that you might have about due diligence, about appraisals, and about closings. Because what we're going to do is, this is going to be sort of an informal conversation that I hope is we're just going to mastermind around anything that you might be going through, anything that you might be seeing or have recently experienced or are experiencing now. So let's start off right off the bat. Does anyone have any issues or questions that we just need to make sure that we get answered? What would those questions be? Y'all don't be shy on me now. Just because the troublemaker's online.
I have a question, Robin.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a seller and they haven't really honestly completed the property disclosure, and they're working things on their own, how do you address that? If I don't know the items, I don't want to know, but I guess from some of the feedback on some of the people going to visit the property, he's trying to address them himself, but they're not on the property disclosure.
So we're going to talk about completing the seller's property disclosure. We're going to talk a little bit about the liability for them as well as for us as the agents. We have some liability around that as well, right? Even though, have you ever noticed that on the seller's disclosure, there is not, on the seller's disclosure and the community association disclosures, there are no places for the buyer's agent or listing agent to sign. right? Heather's giving a thumbs up. That's correct. And why is that, Heather?
Well, because we truthfully, we don't know that they're disclosing everything that they know. And so we can't sign off on something. They've lived in the home. They've got to divulge the information. It would put us at a high risk if we sign that.
Exactly, because it is the seller's property disclosure statement, right? And the community association disclosure is the community association disclosure. So that isn't for us to sign, right? However, if we know there is this little thing called a materially known fact, that if we know that there are things that are going on with the house that affects, it's a materially known fact, if you happen to know about that, and it has not been disclosed, that has to be a conversation that you have to have with the seller, Lynette, where especially, you're saying, I don't want to know. I agree. It's kind of like, oh man, once I know, I'm responsible for it. But once you know that there are things that you don't know, guess what? That's sort of imputed knowledge. You still have that information, right? So what I would advise on completing seller's property disclosure, when you represent the seller and you're representing that seller, our responsibility as agents is to say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, this seller's property disclosure is going to be made a part of this contract. And guess what? It is one of the most litigated documents. It's one of the documents in the contract that will bring up a lawsuit faster than you can say hello. So here's what we want to do, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. When in doubt, disclose. Disclose, because you are protecting yourself, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. You can still fix those items. If you are fixing those items, you disclose it, and then you say that they have been repaired. But especially, we don't want to hide anything. So in direct question, answer to that question, Lynette, I would go back to that seller and say, I'm a little confused on, is there a reason why you didn't disclose these items, or is there a reason why you don't want to disclose these items? Is that a conversation that you feel like you can have with them?
Oh, definitely. It's just that he hasn't lived in the property for a couple years.
Well, now
It's
see,
been
that's
vacant.
something
Yeah.
else, right? We've seen on investor-owned properties where it will say there is no seller's disclosure available to the buyer. The investor has not lived in the home for more than 2 years, right? So a lot of investors will do that. A lot of investors will say that they haven't ever lived in the home, or they haven't lived in the home for 5 or 6 years. So there is that option. Would we prefer that they fill out the seller's property disclosure? Yes, because it's still their disclosure, and it's their responsibility to disclose what they know of the property. So I would say that if he's discovering these things as he goes along, I would say, let's just discover what needs to be discovered, whether he hires an inspector or whatever, and let's get that disclosed, because then when you do get a contract, if there are things that he's still working on that aren't disclosed, you need to let that buyer's agent know that we are going to send you a revised seller's disclosure because he has been working on the property, and we'd like for you to be fully aware of what's going on. And that way it's full disclosure, and you're kind of letting it be known you're doing the right thing. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anyone else have any input on that?
Yeah, I do. Why can't you just back out of it and change the listing to no disclosure? And if it's online, take it offline and just say that, hey, issues have popped up that he wasn't aware of, and we have no disclosure. Why not just back out of it altogether?
Because it's a material known fact at this point, because she now knows that all of those items are there. She is aware of those, and as the agent, it is our responsibility. We can't hide that. So the seller's disclosure still, in my opinion, should stay out there. However, in all honesty, the seller should disclose what they know and what they're fixing. Because again, when it comes down, yes, you could back it out, but that would be a liability to the brokerage. It would be a liability to Lynette, and it would be a liability to the brokerage. Because now Lynette is aware of it. Make sense?
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So this is where you represent the buyer, where you represent the seller. Has any other termite inspection and everything else, has any of that been done yet?
No.
Might be a good idea to go ahead and do that. Since
He's not in a position to do anything.
Financially, he's not in the position to do anything.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So is he selling the property as is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And it's being advertised as is?
No, it has a little background. I don't know how much of it you want me to get into it online. He had it listed previously with another Keller Williams office that had it for foreclosure. The bank decided it should sell for a regular sale.
Got it. Okay. All right. So in that particular case, what you may want to do is advertise it as an as-is sale, and that the seller's disclosure is to the best of the seller's knowledge, and you just leave it at that.
Okay. How do you actually get that wording in the listing?
Mm-hmm. In the listing itself.
Mm-hmm.
So there is in the special circumstances in
Okay.
FMLS, it'll say sold as is, property sold as is, and also in the public remarks you can say property is being sold as is.
Okay, there. Okay.
Does that
okay.
help?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that might also help with the liability on that seller's disclosure just a bit.
Okay. Okay, great. So I'll just put it in those two places because we got to offer the first day, but the inspection discovered some things, so they quickly terminated.
Understood. And so those are the items that he is trying to repair on his own?
Yes.
All
but
right.
I don't know what they are.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So, if he were my client, I would advise him, first of all, just stop and disclose what needs to be disclosed per that seller's disclosure. Does he need to reveal the whole inspection report? No. Does he need to be honest in the seller's disclosure? Yes. Right. He needs to be honest with that. And then just, if he wants to continue, great, but revising the seller's disclosure the whole time. If these are items that are on the seller's disclosure, I mean, there are a lot of things on the report that aren't on a seller's disclosure.
Right.
So as long as he's being truthful and honest with that, that's what we have to get our clients to do. Be truthful, and in completing these documents, they are legal documents.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so due diligence period. Thank you for sharing with that, Lynette. I appreciate that. What are you guys seeing as far as your due diligence periods? And do we need any explanation for the, because let's see, who all do we have on here? So on your due diligence period, do I need to explain what a due diligence period is? Give me a thumbs up or take yourself off mute. We want to make this really this is a workshop here. So tell me what you got going on. Do I need to explain what due diligence is?
That would be helpful because this is my first listing, so that would be very helpful.
Okay, good. Congratulations on the listing, Kim.
Thank you.
Awesome. You're welcome. Okay, so your due diligence period is the time from the time that you go under contract and you fill in that binding agreement date. That binding agreement date, let's say that it's today, and today's September 22nd. Let's say that binding agreement date is September 22nd. Day one starts tomorrow. So let's say that you're doing a 7-day due diligence period. Well, Kim, look at your calendar, and if you're saying you're going to do a 7-day due diligence period, tell me by looking at your calendar, with day 1 being tomorrow, when does the due diligence period expire? Have you got it, Kim?
Sorry, I didn't know I was on mute. Would it be the 30th if it started tomorrow?
That's correct. So your dates begin from the binding agreement date, right? So if you go binding on September 22nd, then you're going to count September 23rd all the way through to the 30th, right? So by the 30th, if it's a 7-day due diligence period, there are items that have to be completed during that due diligence period. That I'll tell you a little story, and I'm telling on myself, but I learned the greatest lesson, and Scott will remember this. My first house deal, my first deal was a land deal, and we're talking 14 years ago. My first contract was a land deal. My second one was a client from New York that had called into my broker's office, and I had, you guys, zero training. And so, you know, I talked with her online, and I got her set up, and I got properties all situated. I had no idea what a buyer consultation was. You guys, I had no idea what a buyer's consultation was. I had no idea how to set expectations with a buyer. I had no idea how to, I was not in Keller Williams. I didn't have this type of training. It was with a small boutique brokerage, who, by the way, the owner of that boutique brokerage also had a law firm that she worked at for 60 hours a week. So I had zero mentorship, zero training. So here I am. I've put this buyer in my car, and I quickly discovered that she really, really, really needed a master on the main or a ranch because she was handicapped. Guess what never got discovered on the buyer consultation, because I never had a buyer consultation and I didn't know which questions to ask. And I had all of these 2-story houses set up for her to see. So we went back to the office after showing a few. We went back to the office, and I completely redid her search, and we got out there and we got her under contract, and everything is great. It's a cash deal. So I said, you know, I went to the broker and I said, what do I need to put in for all of these? And now this was when you had a right to request repair. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. This was the time where we didn't have a due diligence period. And Kim, a due diligence period is a time in which a buyer can terminate for any reason in the state of Georgia. For any reason during that 7 or 10 or 14, whatever days, whatever the number of days get negotiated, right? Back then, we had what was called an inspection period, a right to request repair period. And you couldn't terminate for any reason. You could only terminate if there were inspection items that you requested that were actual defects as defined by the right to request repair exhibit. And if you asked that as a defect, if the seller said no, you could walk. If the seller said no, it's very different than a due diligence period, and it is a very powerful tool for the seller. It's a really powerful tool for the seller. So here it was. We got the lady ordered an inspection. We got the inspection done. I got the inspection report back, and 10 days went by. 10 days went by, because that's the number of days. You guys, I'm embarrassed to tell you, but I want you to learn a lesson here, because 10 days went by, and on the 11th day, I get a phone call from the agent, and the agent said, I guess you guys decided to take the property as is. And I said, no. Why would you think that? And she said, well, you didn't put in an amendment to a request for repair amendment. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I've done something wrong. Oh my gosh. And sure enough, I'd done something wrong. I was supposed to do and inspect, get the right to request amendment in, and I didn't. So guess who paid for all of those repairs to be done, that got the handyman out there and fixed all of those, plus split my money with the brokerage, which was not as good as our split here, and I maybe made $1,500, $2,000 for the sale. It was the best learned lesson ever, and that was, if you do not have a system for your contract to close, and I'm going to share my screen with you in a few minutes. If you don't have a system for your contract to close and getting through due diligence and getting through the appraisal and getting to the closing, if you don't have a system and a task list, you're going to drop the ball somewhere. And the best lesson you can learn is when it has to come out of your own pocket. Anybody else have any stories like that? Heather, care to share?
Yes. So I want to say maybe in June, the first time I was juggling 4 deals, and it was like super chaotic. And I am very systematic, and normally like I totally, I print my important dates, Kim. So you should do that because it's super helpful. But on this one deal, I didn't check, and I knew it was with Quicken Loans. So you guys all know that. So Friday was Quicken. So Friday was the last day of our financing contingency. I had like the craziest week. I was so exhausted. Quickens let me know at 4:30 that they needed an 8-day extension.
8 days.
8 days. So I'm like, okay.
On the inspection, on the finance contingency or the closing?
On the financing.
Wow.
On the last day of contingency. So I was driving, and I'm like, okay, I called the other agent. I'm like, I'm going to write this amendment up. I'm going to extend it, whatever. I got home and I was so exhausted. I went to bed at 7:30 that night. And so I let it expire. And what I learned, so I was terrified. I spoke to Pam Sliger, and she was like, I called her immediately. I'm like, Pam, I don't know what to do. And she was like, Heather, if your clients, so my clients were selling a home and buying a home. And she was like, if the sellers don't agree to extend this, you don't have to, but it's kind of the right thing. You've got to give your clients their earnest money out of your pocket. And it was $10,000. And I wanted to vomit.
I bet.
So I called, thankfully, the agent that I was working with, the listing agent, was with another Keller Williams, and she was so incredible. She's so incredible. And she was like, look, they're having a garage sale today. She's like, I totally get it. You goofed. Bet on you. Let me work it out. She's like, because my clients are buying too, and they have a contingency on the sale. So they're not going to let it slip. And it honestly worked out, but nothing is a bigger lesson than when it's something almost catastrophic like this. And I swear to God, I like check every box, dot every I, cross every T, and I don't go to sleep early. I'm like, I got to make sure this is all done. So that was terrifying for me. And thankfully it worked out. But yes, I've been there.
Here is my, hold on. I'm trying to pull up a document that I have on, here we go. All right, do you see my screen? Give me a thumbs up if you see my screen. Good. If you would like this contract to close task list, I'm happy to share it with you. I revised this just literally this morning. So because I did have this through, when we had dot loop and things like that. So so I think that most everything is correct, but let's talk about this because this is hugely important, you guys. Is that this is your contract to close task list. I created this. This is what worked for me. So when I go under when we go under contract with someone, so let's talk about it from a buyer's perspective first, because if you're doing the listing, you have a whole other task list to getting your listings into both MLSs. So that's an entirely different class. This is a class for getting through due diligence, appraisal, and closing. So what I want to do is sort of show you the tools that I've used, and this is my task list that I created a long time ago. And so the first thing that I do is print the listing report along with a tax record. And I have, hold on, I have folders like this. Okay, the folders like this have the tabs. So it's just the tabs in like this. So I am, you can ask Scott at any time. We're all about redundancies. I like to have my paper, and I like to have my documents, the contracts and everything into our Google Drive. And then we also have our contracts obviously in Command. So I have paper and I have 2 electronic copies, right? So I still print out the listing report. That's the buyer agent report, right? That has everything about the property that you printed out when you were showing the house. So you're going to print that out, and you're going to print a copy of the tax records. And then I typically put that on the left side. I'll put that on the left side. And then on this side is all of the contract. This side is the contract, the exhibits, the amendments. So your contract goes in first along with all of your exhibits behind it. Make sense? I'm going to make a copy of the earnest money, and I'm going to put a copy of that in the file, and I'm going to turn it into Lee. And of course, it's going to be in DocuSign or in Command. Each file, you're also going to print out your buyer brokerage agreement or your listing agreement. You're going to print out the purchase and sale contract along with the commission agreement. You're going to print out the important dates form. Well, what does that look like? Well, that looks like this right here. Not the Zoom, but important dates. Well, let's see if I can add that real quick. This is going to be important, Kim. This is what Heather told you, that you should definitely print that out because it goes on the front of your folder, and it's going to keep you on track. And this is what it looks like. A reminder of important dates in the purchase and sale. So you're going to fill all of this in, and more importantly, you're going to make sure these dates are correct. So your binding agreement date, the date that the earnest money goes in. If there's additional earnest money, it would go in here on the right. Additional option money. That is in the case if you had a contingency and you
Can I ask why would someone have additional earnest money? In what situation would that occur?
The additional earnest money would be, let's say that you negotiated like in the case of what Heather did, she negotiated additional days on the finance contingency, or tried to. Did it happen? Did they give the extension?
Sorry, I couldn't figure out how to unmute myself. What I actually ended up doing was I called Tammy Mills from Shelter.
Yep.
And she jumped on it, and I got my clients a better rate, and we dropped Quicken and we went with Shelter. So
even better.
Yeah, that
even better.
happened on a Saturday, and she had my clients approved on a Monday, and we went forward that way. And so my suggestion is always drop Quickens if you can.
If you can. Although you know what, we've had a few contracts with Quicken over the last year, and it's been okay. It's just the communication is really, really tough, and you just have to stay on top of it. But good on you, you were able to move that. So additional earnest money might be when the seller says, hey, look, I'll give you an extension, but I want an additional $2,000 in earnest money. Right? The next one where it says additional option money, now this could actually apply to new construction, that if you're doing new construction and they decided to do other items that the builder is going to do, there could be additional option money there. Or something in the contract changed, and maybe instead of it being that it did not need to be contingent upon something selling like Heather's deal, that if all of a sudden it changed and the seller was like, well, okay, fine, we can make it contingent upon your house selling, but I want additional option money, that if your sale doesn't go through, then we're going to keep that additional option money, different things like that. Different scenarios could call for those things.
Okay.
Diligence, the day that due diligence period ends. If you don't put that date in there, and guys, redundancy is everything. You'll see on this task list that that once you do the important dates form, you're going to make a copy of the earnest money. You're going to do a point of contact form. And that's really kind of what that important dates is. It's combined. You can have a separate point of contact, but form, but it's just easier to do the reminder dates. This one right here. It's easier to do. Why does it keep going? Oh, sorry, I keep clicking on the wrong server. So this right here, see, it already tells you all of who is who. A point of contact is who's who. The selling agent, the listing agent, the name of the buyers, and down here it tells you who the closing attorney is. So this really is a point of contact form as well as an important dates reminder. This you send to your clients and you send to the other agent in the deal. And you can send it to the lender just so the lender has that as a snapshot as well. Everybody knows and everyone's on the same page so that nobody says, well, I thought it was, you told me it was this. No. You took the dates directly from the contract and you put them on this form so everyone knows. Buyer's agent, selling or listing agent, buyer's seller, they all know. Now, you're not going to send it to the parties, to the clients on the other side of the deal. You're going to send it to the agent on the other side of the deal, and she or he can share it if they want to. Okay? So get back here to the contract list. And of course, you're going to have a copy of the listing report, a copy of the tax records, all go in that paper file. You're going to create the important dates to remember form. You're going to save all of this to a separate file, Dropbox, Google Drive, your desktop, wherever you're going to save it, that you can also access it in case ever command is down or Google Drive, you couldn't get to it or whatever. Have it saved, not only in paper, because you may not be carrying this around with you at all times, the paper, but you need to have it electronically in a couple of different spots, in my opinion.
It should not be on your laptop.
It should be on some.
The question is not if your hard drive fails, it's when your hard drive fails, because all hard drives, even solid state hard drives, fail. If you don't have Google Drive set up, there are a lot of people that can help you get that set up.
I highly recommend that you do that. Google Drive, we have everything in Google Drive. So the office uses Google Drive. We collaborate via Google Drive. Scott has Google Drive for the team. It's really great. And what's also great is, let me show this to you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a minute. Okay, let me see. Can you see the Drive icon on my phone there? It's this one right here.
Yes.
Okay, that one right there, that is your Google, guess what? Do you know how many times I have forwarded documents, contracts, amendments, copy of earnest money from my phone right here? Now, will Command do this? Yes, but so will Google Drive. So you have redundancies just in case one, just in case one, something happens with one, you have the other. And how impressive is that to the other agent when you can say, I'll have that to you in just a minute. How many times I've forwarded a seller's disclosure, even though it was uploaded in FMLS, and somebody's like, I don't see it, I'm not, don't worry about it, I got it, I'll send it to you, it'll be to you in less than a minute. I pull the app up, it's there in less than a minute. So it's really cool. Have those redundancies in place, you guys. Okay, let me go back to my share screen really quick. I want to show you this, and then we'll get into some more questions. You're going to save all of your above client folder in Drive. You'll create and upload the contract, or upload the contract to Command if you use a different database to do that. You're going to obtain a CBS. Anybody know what a CBS is?
It's the code on the lockbox.
It's the code on the lockbox. Thank you, Heather. It's a call before showing. Guess what, you guys? Your inspectors need the CBS code.
And so will
they have to have, because inspectors don't have full access like we have access to the listings. Vendors, there are certain vendors, even some photographers have a lockbox, an e-key, but they don't all have all available access like we do. So when you got that lockbox to put on your listing, there was a CBS code assigned to that lockbox, which, by the way, you can change it later on if you want to. But right now, you're going to have a specific CBS code to that lockbox. That you'll need to give it to the buyer's agent. If you're the seller, you need to give it to the buyer's agent so they can give it to their inspector. And hopefully they're going to be there at the inspection, but if they're not, the inspector will need that CBS code. So you want to make sure you get it, write it down on the outside of your folder so you have it at all times, and put it in your phone so that in case you're out and about and somebody calls up and says, ask what the CBS code is, you can access it quickly. Okay? If you represent the buyers, you are going to schedule the inspections if possible. Now, we've had some buyers that say, no, I'll schedule the inspection. But I don't know, out of probably 450 transactions, I've had maybe 3 or 4 say they wanted to schedule their own. So it's important, if you can, you get your own inspectors that you're really familiar with, and say to that buyer, hey, would you like for me to schedule the inspection? We have a couple of inspection companies that, we've worked with over the years. We don't get anything for recommending them, but we have, 3, 4, 5 of them. Would you like to see the websites, and you can tell me which one you'd like to go with? And they'll go on and they'll decide which one they want to go with and say, great, I'm happy to schedule that inspection for you. Why do I want to schedule the inspection? Because I want to be there. I want to be there for that inspection. I want to see what the inspector is seeing, because when in the due diligence period, I'm going to need to do an amendment to address concerns. And when we do the amendment to address concerns, then if we've been at the inspection, then I know what I'm going to ask for, because the inspector is saying, yeah, see that wood rot right here in the left corner, and hey, this window over here has been fogged over, looks like it has a broken seal. Well, you know which one it is, and you can write down which one it is, because when it comes time to do your amendment to address concerns, if you haven't seen it, you're going to have a hard time asking for what you need to ask for. Now let's talk about due diligence, because due diligence is the time in which if you represent the buyer, you're going to get inspections done, and you're going to ask for repairs. And as you ask for repairs, that's being done in amendment to address concerns. Everybody know what an amendment to address concerns looks like?
Mm-hmm.
Anyone that doesn't know what an amendment to address concerns look like, give me a thumbs up or take yourself off mute. Okay, you don't know. Okay, good. This is what we're going to do. I want you to just take a look at this, and when you play around, probably one of the best pieces of advice I can give to new agents is, you ready? Get your pens ready. Are you ready? Read the dang contract. Read the contract. Read the amendments. Read the exhibits so that at 10 o'clock at night and your due diligence period expires at 11:59 that night, you're not trying to do this and you've never even read the exhibit. Don't do that. Read the exhibits, read the amendments, read the purchase and sale, read the listing agreement, read the buyer agreement, and then practice explaining those contracts to people. If you don't have a deal right now, that is okay. Read the contract and role play with someone on how to explain what you are asking them to sign. Because as you get through the due diligence, here you are, you're writing your amendment to address concerns. Here's what I'm going to ask that you don't do. Please don't refer to the inspection report in the amendment to address concerns. Can anyone tell me why you shouldn't do that? Come on, talk to me.
No, I'm interested to know why, because early on I was told I should. So this is like totally new info for me.
If items are in there, you have to get them completed for closing.
No.
Even,
Not in the inspection report. Are you saying that if you, explain that a little bit further, Lynette,
Okay.
before I turn, explain that for me.
Okay, if there are items that, what should I say? If they're critical items like electrical, plumbing, some of those items, and they're addressed and the buyer decides, no, that's okay. And if they're in there and they are marked as critical, they have to be completed for closing.
Or the lender will make you do it.
So you're saying that if the inspection report shows that those critical things and the lender sees the inspection report, that the lender would require that it's fixed. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
That's happened.
Yes, that's why, let me tell you something, you guys. Every lender will tell you, if you ask them directly, they will say, I don't want to see an inspection report. I don't want to see the inspection report. So you want the seller to see the inspection report if you represent the buyer. You want the seller to see it if you represent the buyer. So you're going to send the inspection report to the listing agent, and you're going to say, here is the list, here is the inspection report. Amendment to address concerns it will follow. Either you're going to do it in the same email, or you're going to send the report and then you're going to send the amendment to address concerns. I don't care which way. When you, in an amendment to address concerns, if you say, per inspection report, page 29, items 1, 2, 3, and 4, seller to repair. Now, you're thinking it makes sense to do that because they have the reference, they have the report, they can see the pictures, they can see what's wrong with it, right? Makes sense. But that means that underwriter, Quicken Loans or direct lender or wherever they are outside and they could be in an office in Michigan and have no idea what synthetic stucco is, because they may not have synthetic stucco in Michigan. They may have no idea about termites here. They may have no idea that you can get a termite bond even if you've had termites. It just has to be treated first. They don't know the nuances, right? And if you reference that inspection report in that amendment, guess what the underwriter could ask for? The underwriter can ask for a full copy of that inspection report. And do we really want an underwriter to see an entire inspection report? Nah. So how do we do that? We need to be able to ask very specifically what we want the sellers to fix when we represent the buyer, right? So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to look at that inspection report, and if the inspection report says wood rot observed in various places on the house, oh my gosh, I hate when inspectors do that. You need to be really specific. So another reason why you should attend your inspections, because you can make your own notes and you can say, oh, he's talking about the wood rot up there on the right side of the gable on the right side of the house, right? And so then you're going to write it, seller shall, don't ask for them to repair wood rot, because that means that they could just take some Bondo and just slather it on there and sand it down a little bit and then paint it, and guess what? Wood rot's repaired. Is that the best way to do it? Probably not. Some, if it's at a different angle, sometimes that could be acceptable, but isn't it better? Wouldn't you want them to remove the rotted wood, replace with new wood, caulk with new wood, caulk the new wood, and paint it to match as best as possible? Isn't that a better option than a bunch of Bondo? And you're going to say at the following locations, right side of right gable on the right side of the house, right? Or the front right of the house. Or if it's a window that's been fogged over because the seal has broken, you're going to say on the left window of the top left bedroom, top sash, seller to replace window or window panes, or however you want to do it, due to a broken seal. So you're going to take the wording from an inspection report and you're going to put it, instead of just a statement, you're going to say the following, you're going to make that repair in the following manner. You say the time that how it's to be repaired, right? If it's a plumbing issue, and you really think, hey, guys, tightening down a toilet isn't necessarily a plumbing issue. It could be if the seal is broken and you really should remove the toilet and put in a new seal. It could be, but it could just be that the bolts need to be tightened down. So do know what you're doing. When you go to that inspection report and he says, oh, this toilet bowl is loose. Well, is it loose because the bolts need to be tightened, or do you think the seal is broken? Oh, well, it's wobbly. It's probably the seal. Or if it just moves a little bit, maybe you just need to tighten that bolt down, right? So that's why you should be at the inspection report, at the inspection, so that you can interpret the inspection report to your buyers so that they don't freak out over it, and you can word it correctly on an amendment to address concerns. Now, I've talked way too much, so ask me your questions, comments on that.
I have a question, Robin.
Yes,
Can you
Jenny.
hear me okay?
I can.
Do you start your amendment to address concerns with, a standard statement, all parties agree and acknowledge that a qualified blah, blah, blah will complete the repairs, or do you do it in each sentence?
I don't. What I do is I typically, and I brought one up so that I could take a look at it. Okay. If there are, I've got one that I can show you, and let me share my screen here. Is that the one I want? Yes. Okay, on this one, what I did is I said, on this one, I said, seller shall perform. Now, I don't say all parties will agree because it's already up here. It's up here where it says all parties agree. Do you see that right here? All parties agree that if this amendment is signed, right? So
gotcha. Okay, that's good.
So I don't feel like I need to say that again. And so, but I will say seller shall perform the following repairs and have completed at least 3 days prior to closing and provide receipts. Now, the reason why I did it that way is because I needed a licensed contractor to do certain things. See, I said contract with a plumbing company specializing in septic systems. And I needed the license. I needed a licensed contractor. Now, do I need a roofer to come out and replace plumbing vent boots on the roof? I really don't need a roofer specifically. A licensed contractor could do that. The same thing, a licensed contractor could seal the cracks in the foundation because they were minimal cracks. So I didn't need a foundation company to do that. That's why we went to the inspection. I talked to the inspector and discovered that I didn't need a licensed contractor to cover the hole in the sheetrock in the upstairs hallway bathroom. I didn't need him to do that. A handyman could have done that. Even the seller may have been able to do that. So that's just one of those. I'm trying to look at where I have a couple of others. And so it really just depends on what those items are. Does that
Hey,
make
thank you
sense,
so much.
Jenny?
Yes, thank you so much. I figured you had a good solution for that.
Yeah, I hope that helps. Anybody else? Questions, concerns, observations?
Robin, you briefly mentioned the right to request repairs, and you kind of spoke as past tense, like we don't use it anymore. But I was in another meeting, maybe in my PC group, and someone brought up using it as a negotiation tool, almost, I believe they were saying it for the seller. So how does that actually work?
I'm going to show this to you right now. Can you see, everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Property sold with right to request repairs. Kim, the way that this is powerful for the seller is that sellers are mostly concerned that, of course, their houses are going under contract fairly quickly because we have such low inventory. So what's happening is buyers, not saying that any of us have done this, but a lot of buyers will put a contract on a house and it might not be their 100% house that they want, but hey, they've got to find a place, and so they put a contract on there. But meanwhile, they continue to look, and they know, because they may have negotiated a 10-day due diligence period, that if they find something better, that buyer may say, hey, let's terminate that other one because I found this one and I really want this one instead. Okay, so it's a risk to the seller. Now, we didn't always do due diligence periods. It was the reason why we went away from the property sold with right to request repairs was in 2008 to 2010. It was during the housing crisis, and if I think there some of you, Jenny, I think you were in business during that time as well, and 50% of what we were showing were foreclosures. Well, foreclosures were being sold as is. This might help you a little bit, Lynette, too, is that, and I don't know if he doesn't have any money, you may not even want to do it this way and just stick to your as-is strategy. But Kim, when you represent the seller, and if you think that house is pretty neat and tidy, okay, maybe the systems are fairly new, maybe the house is only a couple of years old, and so you feel pretty confident that the condition of that house looks really good, you might go to your seller and you might say, hey, why don't we say that we will, that we want to sell the property with right to request repairs only because of this right here. Now, the defect resolution period it's just like a due diligence period. It's a set number of days. It's not like the due diligence period where they can terminate for any reason. It is a set number of days that you negotiate that, okay? And then this is the most important thing to understand is this right here. Do you see this defects right here, this whole paragraph? It's important that you understand if you're going to do a right to request repairs, then it's important that you understand this exhibit. You must read it front, backwards, sideways. You must read it to completely understand it so that you can communicate what it is to the other agent, because this was done away with in 2012, I believe. And whereas not the form itself, but the practice of selling property sold with right to request repair. They brought in due diligence. They changed the contract to right to request repair to due diligence. You can still sell a property with right to request repairs. And the reason it's an advantage is that the buyer can't walk away for any reason. The buyer can only terminate if under this defects, the term defect shall mean termites, okay? If there's lead-based paint, if there is something that constitutes a violation of current laws, if there is, this is important to see this number 3, if there is something at the present time, if it is not in good and working order. So if you had an air conditioner that did not work, that would be considered a defect. So when you do an amendment, subject to the right to request repairs, and you're asking for items, guess what? As the buyer's agent, you can only ask for defective items as defined right here in the exhibit. As opposed to doing due diligence where you can ask that they paint a wall because they don't like it. You can ask for anything in a due diligence period. The seller may not agree to it, but but you can ask for anything.
And if you're a buyer's agent and you use this in a strategic position with multiple offers, is that right? You can do it that way?
That's correct.
What I was thinking. I was thinking the same thing.
Exactly, you guys, because what that does is it shows the strength of your buyer. It shows that seller that your buyer is committed to this deal. Okay, it shows them hey, they're committed. They're not wanting to walk away for any reason. They chose you, and they're wanting to work with you on your house. So yes, it can be very powerful. Would I do it on a house that was built back in the 50s? And as I look through, when I'm, if I were, you guys, I talk in the present as if I'm showing houses now. I'm completely out of production. So it's just by habit, 14 years of talking like this. So, but if we're showing a house, we are going to pay attention to the condition and quality of the systems in that house. We're going to make sure that the air conditioner isn't 20 years old and on its last leg before I suggest that we do a right to request repairs. So know the house, know the systems, because when you submit that offer in a multiple offer situation, you better be really sure that it's going to negotiate through. So you don't want to do it on a house that looks like it's about to fall apart. Questions? Okay. If anybody wants that task list, please let me know and put your information in the chat, please. Okay. Let me get back to that because that's going to help us go along here. Okay. So can you, is the task list on your screen?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Okay. So now if you're representing the buyer, you're scheduling the home inspection, you're scheduling the pest inspection, you're scheduling the stucco inspection if it's a synthetic stucco and you're concerned. And then you're going to, not only are you going to schedule all of those, but you guys, I found the most effective way to keep the clients in the loop is that you put all of your dates on your calendar. And then you share and invite that client to that event. So if your due diligence period expires on September 30th, you're going to go into your calendar and you're going to say 123 Main Street DD expires. And it's going to be an all-day event, so it's glaring on your calendar. And then you're going to invite them to that event. So guess what? It's on their calendar too, so that nobody can say, hey, you didn't tell me that. Now, I wouldn't invite the other agent because that's, to me, a little too intrusive. But with your own client, make sure that they have these dates on a calendar. Not only are you doing it on the important dates, but invite them on your calendar. It takes less than 30 seconds to do that. And it's just one more way to let them know that you're on your game, right? The other thing I want to mention here is number 14. Call the lender at least once per week to check on the file. I can't stress anymore how important this is, that if you are not in touch with that and you're not communicating with that lender at least once a week, you guys, then you're going to get a surprise, and you're not going to like those surprises, like what Heather did. Heather got a surprise. Hello, last day of financing contingency, and that never feels good. Now, it doesn't mean that Heather didn't check in with them. They're a little difficult to communicate with. If you have a lender that's difficult to communicate with, even more so, you hound them. Call them every day if you must. Text them, email them. I need a status update. The good lenders, you guys, you don't have to chase them down. They're gonna keep you up to date. But here's something else I've noticed with lenders, and I want to talk straight with you for a minute. There are lenders who are great at communicating. They really are. There are really great lenders that are good at communicating, and some are good at their job, but they're never going to be a teacher. They're never going to be the one that can break it down simple, and they're a lender because they're good with numbers, they're good with their job, they're good with their task, and they're like bam, 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 I'm getting it done, right? But not all lenders are good like Kathy Vitale and Tammy Mills. Not all of them are like that. And so what happens is your buyer is so excited, we're getting a house, woohoo! And then they start submitting their documents, and then the loan processor starts communicating with them. Oh, I need a copy of this check. Hey, can you explain what this is all about? Hey, I need a copy that you paid your homeowners association. Hey, I need a copy of I need a verification of employment. Oh, hey, the verification of employment doesn't say exactly what you said on your application. I need further information. And what happens is you're over here in your world and you're thinking everything is great because this is a good lender this buyer is with, and you may have even recommended that buyer, and everything is going really great, you think. And then you get a phone call from your buyer and you're like, oh my gosh, this lender is driving me crazy. I mean, I thought you said this lender was good. Well, the lender is good, but maybe the lender isn't as good at communicating as they are in getting the deal done. And so then what happens is, and this is what we have to do with clients all the time, it's where you have to be able to say, now let me tell you something. You're going to be talking to the loan officer, and the loan officer is going to originate your loan. They're going to get it started, and then they're going to move it down the pipeline to the loan processor. And the loan processor, they're all about their checklist. They're making sure that we have all the documents that we want in the file, because then it's going to move on down the pipeline into the closing department or through the underwriter and then to the closing department. And once it gets into the underwriter, guess what we don't want the underwriter to have to do? We don't want the underwriter to have to spend more time on your loan than on anybody else's loan, because then we become the problem child, and then we begin to annoy that underwriter. We don't want to annoy the underwriter. So here's what the loan processor does. The loan processor says, hey, we need all of these documents, these 20 documents or whatever they are, right? We need these because what the loan processor wants to do is they want to check everything on that task list, and they want to put a nice little bow on it and send it on over to the underwriter. So the underwriter says, oh, what a clean loan. Look at all those check marks. Okay, let me take a look at this. Oh yeah, let's see if we can. And they're so happy because it's this nice, neat little package, right? And the underwriter says, yeah, looks good. Appraisal looks good. We're going to move it on into the closing department. Well, what happens is during that checklist from the loan processor, this is the time, and we've probably all been through it if you bought a house. You feel like you just signed your firstborn's, entire will to, right? This is, I mean, it's like, take my blood now, why don't you, right? It is so invasive. But if you tell your buyer you're setting expectations, if you tell the buyer that this is what's going on, and you know what, you should tell the seller too, because maybe the seller hasn't purchased a home in 20 years and the seller doesn't know, and they think, oh, this bad loan officer, they don't know what they're doing. No, they do know what they're doing, and they're just trying to make sure that they've got these contingencies in place, that if the underwriter asks for something, the loan processor says, oh yeah, see, it's here in the package, here you go. But if you don't set those expectations, at the end, when things start going sideways and you got to get this, and well, the verification of employment didn't come through right, or something like that, now we have an issue and the emotions are high and everybody's like, hey, how come they didn't ask this for us back in the beginning? So set those expectations, describe the process to your buyer so they don't get blindsided, and let them know it's not the big bad loan officer. It's really the monster called the underwriter. I joke around with that, but really it's the underwriter that's gonna, they're gonna be like this. So you wanna set those expectations. That's why you call the lender. If your buyer isn't giving those documents on time, then the finance contingency period, when it comes up to be expired, oh my gosh, that's when you have to ask for an extension, or when there are further explanations. And if that loan processor hasn't done their job, and then it's now the financing contingency and they're scrambling because they haven't asked for these documents before then, it makes everybody look bad and emotions are high. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Appraisal issues.
Yes.
Anybody had appraisal issues?
Yes, recently. Yep.
Talk to me about it, Jenny.
It was very frustrating. It was a home in a small neighborhood, and there was a comp across the street. And my home, the home that I had listed, did not appraise, and the home across the street appraised. And there were really no other homes to compare it to. It's hard to explain. There were no other homes to compare it to. And while we're not supposed to do price per square foot, that's kind of what I went on, pricing the home. And I got offers in like 2 days, multiple offers. And so I thought I explained that to the appraiser, and I provided him with comps, or not. I didn't provide him with comps. I left them on the table for him to find.
Yeah.
And then whenever we had an issue, I found out that he wasn't from the area and he didn't know the schools and things like that. And he asked the question, did the schools matter?
Oh, wow.
So I should have let him in, is what I should have done. I should have met him at the home to let him in the house, maybe. I don't know. Or talk to him on the phone and help set up the appointment. Somehow I should have been more involved. And I wasn't that time. And it bit me bad.
Kind of like when I had to pay the handyman bill. It hurts,
Mm-hmm.
it does, it hurts. So what I hear you saying, Jenny, is that you would do that differently, and detail out how you would do that differently.
So I had so it was a multiple offer situation. There were several homes, and the other agent was very experienced, and we chose to deal with him and his buyer. And so because he was so experienced and so kind of assertive, I guess is a good word, he set up everything and did everything his way. And typically what I would do is I would put some things out on the counter for the appraiser to see, or, when he called for the CBS code,
yep,
I would give him the CBS code, and I would say, do you have any questions? Are you from the area? Do you know the area well? Are you familiar with the school districts, things like that? And I didn't get a chance to do that because the other agent was being so assertive. He kind of pushed me out of the way.
So, and I'm so sorry that happened. It is, it's tough when you are the listing agent because you're in receive mode, and we can't dictate how, you know, how the buyer's agent does things. And I say this a lot, the buyer's agent is the maestro in a transaction. You're the driver. The buyer's agent drives everything. You're driving the offer in, you're driving the amendment to address concerns, you're submitting an amendment to reduce sales price if it doesn't appraise. The buyer's agent drives everything. And so the listing agent is in receive mode. And so it's, you know, it's oftentimes you're playing defense, and it's hard to play defense. A lot of times it's hard to play defense when, you know, especially when you've got somebody that's really aggressive and assertive. And sometimes they can be bullies, you know?
That's right. And we're taught too that the smartest agent usually does the most work, or the most, you know, whatever. The agent that works the hardest is usually the one that is the maestro, kind of what you're saying. So when you have another agent that is as assertive or whatever as you are, you lose a lot of control. Exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, it's as a listing agent, it is sometimes difficult to set the expectations because, again, we're in receive mode. We don't have control over how things are written. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't counter offer something. It doesn't mean that we can't, you know, if you get an amendment to address concerns that's full of references to the inspection report, you better believe that I would be rewriting that amendment to address concerns and sending it back, because I'm not going to have that in an amendment to address concerns, right?
That's right. I just did that. That's exactly right. Yep.
Yes, and you can do the same thing on, you know, on any, you can rewrite the counter offer. You can counter offer, but still, as a listing agent, you know, you're having to be a little more tactful, and you're having to, you know, grab that ball when it comes in and figure out how you're going to handle that and handle your seller and navigate your seller through it, right? So
you always have to assume that the buyer's agent doesn't know what all you're teaching us today, like. And so he might reference all those, and he did. Even though he's experienced, he referenced the inspection report. And I did exactly what you said. I turned around and I rewrote it. I took time to rewrite it the way I wanted it to read so that it didn't reference the inspection report. He actually just put numbers. He just put 10.2, 14.8, and that told me one of two things. Number one, he knew I would counter, and he wanted me to write it, which is the case, I think. He wanted me to do the work, which was fine. But number two, he might not have been as experienced as what I thought, because what you told us today about not sharing that inspection report, I mean, that is huge. Like, that's the biggest part of the biggest deal.
You know, we had earlier this year or late last year, we had a listing that was in bad shape, and it was not being sold as is. It was in bad shape, and thankfully it did appraise, but it was a local lender that I'd never heard of, and in the email from the lender to the buyer, the lender said, send all applicable reports. Well, the buyer thought, first-time home buyer, and the buyer's agent wasn't advising this buyer clearly, because the buyer herself emailed the inspection report to the lender.
Oh my gosh.
Exactly what I said. And I was freaking out. How in the world did that happen? Who sent the inspection report? I mean, I was like livid. And the poor little buyer did, because she thought she was supposed to be doing this. And next thing you know, we got, you know, it came back that you have to fix this, and you have to fix this, and you have to fix this. And you know, we just said, absolutely not. We're not fixing it.
It had to be done, or the lender probably wouldn't let it go through, and then the buyer may not could afford it.
We said we weren't fixing it. we said we would not fix that, or we would not fix these things, that it was being, that in the you know what, it was sold as is. I didn't advertise that it was sold as is, but they did take it in as is condition. And I pushed back to the lender and I said, this buyer agreed to take it in as is condition. There will be no repairs made.
Well,
It's
the buyer's
in
agent,
contract.
should have maybe paid some of it, because she should have educated her client not to do that.
Yeah, she should have. But that's, you know, again, that's where educated buyers and sellers make the best buyers and sellers. Educate your people. Educate them. Make sure your processes are in place. Educate your people. If you don't educate them, then it's your fault. Right? I mean, I honestly believe that. I mean, unless somebody is just so ignorant and they're just so out there that they willfully go against it, or they just simply forgot. But guys, we have to educate our clients. We must, right? Okay, so on an appraisal, let's talk about, first of all, what to do to help and you've probably heard this already, but it bears repeating. Just like Jenny left the comps on the table, I mean, I have been where we try to be at the appraisals all the time. Sometimes the appraiser slips in there. So let me give you a little hint. In your, once it goes under contract, in your past due diligence, make sure that the lender knows that due to security issues, you need to be called in order for the appraiser to access the house. Now, you're not saying that it has an alarm. You're not saying that, that there is a security guard. You're saying you need to be the point of contact for that appraiser. That way the appraiser doesn't slip in and you haven't had an opportunity to be the champion of that listing to the appraiser. So you must make sure the listing agent, I'm talking about you as the listing agent. As the listing agent, you make sure that that lender knows you are the point of contact. And even if the house is vacant, then you may even say, instead of due to security issues, you may say, there is no lockbox at the house. Appraiser must contact the listing agent, and take the listing box with you. Right? Take the lockbox with you. Do whatever you have to do to make sure you're there so that you get the phone call. And if you can't be there, then make sure that you're sending, you get that appraiser's email, you're sending the comps, you're sending a list of updates. Get the list of updates from your seller. If your seller has done $50,000, $100,000, $5,000, whatever improvements your seller has done to the property, make sure you have a list of that along with the approximate prices. Approximate. There are some sellers that will tell you to the cent of what they've put into that house. But most are saying, well, I paid this. You want an approximate price, because we're trying to champion the value of that listing. You're trying to justify the value of that listing. Yes, it got multiple offers. That's great. But you are giving the appraiser the evidence of the improved value on that property. So
I know another thing that happened on mine was the homes in the neighborhood were, there was the same subdivision, same name, but across there was a main drag through the middle of it, and one side went to a different school and the other side went to a different school. Mm-hmm. And the appraiser didn't know that because the appraiser wasn't from the area. And so that school thing is super important too.
And it is important. And this is where when you give comps for something like that, you can say, hey, look, on this side of the neighborhood where they go to this school, and on this neighborhood where they go to this school, which is a 10 out of 10, and this one is a 6 out of 10 or whatever that is, and print out that that greatschools.net or whatever, print that out so they see it. And you say, this is why this one is priced at $400,000 and this one is priced at $350,000, because this one is more desirable because of its location. and the schools that it goes to. I find you have to do the appraiser's job as much as you can. And so then if you do get a low appraisal, guess what? Your sellers saw that you did everything you could to justify that price and make sure that to champion their listing. And so if it does come in with a low appraisal, you're like, you guys, we can try to dispute it. Now you can dispute an appraisal, but you can only provide the comps and the justification for the dispute to the buyer's agent, and the buyer's agent has to dispute it with the lender, with the buyer's permission. If the buyer doesn't want it disputed, it doesn't matter what you do to try to make that appraisal better. If the buyer says, I'm good with the appraisal, you can do nothing to dispute it. If the buyer says he's okay with it.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yep. A lender can do nothing because the lender's client is the buyer. And so if you can't, now you can do that. You can say, look, here is everything. But the appraiser, you know, the lender, their hands are tied. If the buyer says, no, I am good with this and I don't need to dispute it.
Because they want to ask for a reduction.
Yes, although there are some that I've had where the buyers looked right at it and said, yeah, I agree. That's a crappy appraisal. Do your best. We're okay with paying that amount. Do your best. And sometimes I've gotten an adjustment and sometimes we haven't. Right?
Wow.
But do what you can ahead of time, just like what you did, Jenny. Do what you can, go above and beyond. And I've had some appraisers, do this, and no, I don't, I don't need you to tell me anything. It's like, okay, sure. Well, the client would like for you to have this. You would like to have the comps and the package that I've prepared for you. Here you go. Thank you so much. You have a really great day. And then I've had other appraisers that say, yeah, tell me all about it. Tell me what they've done. Right? It just depends on personalities. Okay. Any questions about that?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, Mara.
Hi, Robin. I am working with a Facebook.
Uh-huh.
And
so you represent the buyer?
I'm the buyer. Yes.
Gotcha.
I represent the buyer. Is there anything that I have to be aware of? I know that it's important. We're talking about appraisals that are not from the area, they don't know anything about, and that can affect usually negatively, right, to the appraisal.
Yeah, sometimes.
Is there anything that I have to be aware, since I am basically helping the seller with the paperwork in terms of appraisals? What do I do, if anything?
This is going to sound a little heartless. Since you represent the buyer and you do not represent the seller, and in this particular case, the seller is unrepresented, it is up to the seller to provide that list of updates. You will be doing the best for your buyer to not advise the seller on how to improve the, to not justify their price. Because if it doesn't appraise and that for sale by owner thought that it was worth that, and they're not justifying and they're not providing evidence of the value of that house, your job is to represent the buyer. And if that means that the appraisal comes in lower than what the purchase price is, then you're going to put an amendment in front of that seller saying that the sales price needs to be reduced to the appraised value.
That agent.
Now, the lender, I am working with the lender, and so does the lender communicates with the seller?
Mm-hmm.
Let them know that the appraisal is coming?
Yes. Now, if you have not provided the contact information for the seller, for the lender, then you may want to do that so that you're not the middleman, since you don't represent the seller. I would attempt to do that. If they can't get in touch with the seller and they just call you, you're going to have to obviously call the seller and say, hey, by the way, the appraisal is scheduled for 1 o'clock, Tuesday the 23rd, right?
Got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, any other questions around appraisals? Good. Okay, closings. And I have 5 minutes to tell you about closings. Your lender or the lender for the buyer is going to need to send out what is called a closing disclosure acknowledgement to that buyer 3 days prior to closing. At least 3 days. It could be, it could be disclosed 5 days. Now, there are a couple of terms that can be, that are used the same and that it can get confusing. The lender will send out a truth in lending disclosure way back in the beginning. There's one disclosure. Then you have a seller's property disclosure. You have a community association disclosure. You have a closing disclosure. You have all kinds of disclosures in a contract. But before closing, the lender is going to send to the buyer a copy of the closing disclosure so that it discloses the details of the transaction, and it's pretty much going to look the same as what's going to be at the closing table. Now, sometimes there may be adjustments because maybe an HOA letter comes in late or whatever, but those adjustments aren't going to be much different. What this is disclosing are the terms of the loan, the interest rate, the mortgage payments, that it's disclosing the details to the loan. And that buyer has to acknowledge that closing disclosure 3 days in advance, and they acknowledge it. It's usually sent out via DocuSign, and they sign that they acknowledge that they've read it and they've received it. If the buyer doesn't acknowledge that at least 3 days prior to closing, then that closing has to be delayed. So remember when I said talk to the lender? Talk to the lender at least once a week. You want to make sure you're talking to the lender. Hey, did the closing disclosure acknowledgement go out? Has the buyer acknowledged it? Because if the buyer hasn't acknowledged it and it's 3 days before closing, guess what? You're going to have a problem because that closing is going to have to get delayed. Okay? Educate your buyer on what has to be done. Educate your seller on, hey, by the way, they're going to have to sign this, and I'm making sure that, that the buyer's agent is doing that, but I just want to let you know. And then you want to follow up with your buyer. Hey, did you get that closing acknowledgement, the closing disclosure acknowledgement from the lender? Oh, you didn't get that yet. Let's call the lender and find out what's going on. Make sense? All right. Okay, so I've got okay. Scott at Robin Lemon Team wants the closing task list. Oh my goodness, you guys, Scott and I have been married for 38 years, and I love that man to pieces. Okay. Would like a copy. So pretty much everybody on the call wants a copy. I'm going to send out a list of, I'm going to send out that contract close list because I hope that will help you. Any questions, ahas, anything you want to say?
One thing that go ahead, Jenny, sorry.
Go ahead, Jenny.
The thing that I found most helpful was, I think it was so smart about you saying, send the inspection report to the buyer's agent or to the buyers. And I mean, to the seller's agent, if you're representing the buyer, because that lets them forward it on over. Like if you just sent the report and no amendment to address concerns yet, that lets them look over everything that's wrong with their house and be like, oh my gosh, like I had no idea all this stuff was wrong. Wonder what they're going to ask for. So maybe when you send your list, it's not as bad as what it could be.
You're exactly right, Jenny. Let me give you another little inside tip. When you represent the seller, please ask your seller if they would like to see the inspection report. If they don't want to see the inspection report unless specifically asked for it, then you make sure that you tell the buyer's agent, do not send that inspection report. The seller has requested not to see it unless he absolutely needs to see it after you send the amendment to address concerns. Now, why would we not want to have the seller, why would we not to get that inspection report and immediately send it to the seller? Why would we not want to do that?
It'll make them
So they don't
mad.
have to disclose.
That's exactly right. It's exactly right. Exactly what Lynette was talking about earlier of that seller's disclosure. Whatever is disclosed to the seller, if they found that there was a bunch of mold in the basement, that is a person's opinion, and maybe they took pictures. Guess what? The seller is responsible for that. And so are you. You are now responsible to tell the seller, we have to disclose that. That's a material known fact now. There is mold in the house. It has to be remediated, and we have to disclose it, and we have to remediate it.
Oh my gosh.
On the buy side, though, that helps you to make sure that seller stays in the contract with you.
That's
right.
exactly right. So when you represent the buyer, you send that inspection report, unless you've been told not to send the inspection report.
Oh my
But
gosh,
a good
that's so
listing
smart.
agent, if they don't want, if they've advised their seller that you might not want to see that just yet, a good listing agent's going to say, hey, hold off on sending that inspection report. You send me the amendment to address concerns first. And then if we need the inspection report, we'll ask for it. Okay, inside tip there. Okay. Anybody else have any questions, ahas, or anything like that? You guys, thank you so much for joining me today. I've totally enjoyed hanging out with you and talking about, I usually talk about business and GPS and planning and stuff like that. It's kind of fun to get into the details with you like this. So I really, really appreciate that. Call me anytime that you need anything, that you have questions. Remember, Susan Corley is a mentor. Kathy Ray are mentors. Agent Leadership Council, they can help you at any time. My door's open. Anytime you need anything, please reach out. We're always here for you guys.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you. Talk to you guys later.
It was super helpful.
Thank you. I'm glad.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mrs. Lemon.
You're welcome, Mr. Lemon.
Wow.
All right. Bye, guys.